Hey YouTube, Hive Radical here, responding to some comments made by rd1999 in his, comments in the section in one of my video responses to a video series that was done by Clark. I can't remember his name, but it was titled Friendly Neighborhood Gay Mormon or something along those lines. And I can't even think of the title to my series right now, but these are the comments that he put in there, and I just want to respond to those. I've wanted to respond to them for a while. My comments keep taking too long. I'm going to try to make them concise. There's kind of an overall theme in a lot of these comments, and it's this whole thing. Well, they've got a lot of baggage coming into this world. They've got a setup. Kind of this overall view that it's kind of things are stacked against them, and at one point, you say if we have our stance right on this, then as a church, then God has something to answer for in the next life. First of all, I want to share my personal view that I think that's kind of a dangerous view to take, and one of the further things you shared with that is that the church was wrong on blacks in the priesthood. Certainly, the blacks in the priesthood didn't have a doctrinal base as far as for the actual, at least not one I'm aware of, and there's been general authorities that have stated that there's not a doctrinal base for it. But I don't think lacking a doctrinal base means that the church was wrong in having the policy of not allowing blacks for a time to not have the priesthood. I think that's confusing things, because something isn't a doctrine, if it's something that's mandated by those who are in authority, then it's to be followed, and it is, at least in my view, correct and the right thing at that time, regardless of how the world perceives it, regardless of whether or not there is a doctrinal backing for it. The doctrinal backing is in the fact that there's God's mouthpiece on earth, and if God's mouthpiece is doing things contrary to God's will, that's between God and God's mouthpiece. And but I mean, it's kind of along the lines of something with tithing. If you're really giving tithing in the proper spirit, then it really doesn't matter what ends up happening with it from your perspective. I mean, because God will take care of it. You shouldn't withhold. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't withhold tithing just because you don't feel the church is spending it the way they should, because it's the doctrine there is tithing, and the doctrine with blacks in the priesthood, or with there's actual principles underlying these things, and so I'd be really careful in how you're approaching that. But kind of getting back to this whole idea of people coming from these setups that have things stacked against them. First of all, I think there's a real problem on the judging end, because how do you determine what is harder or easier for someone in the overall picture? I mean, certainly, if you were lacking an attraction for the female gender and you were a male and you had an attraction for the male gender, yeah, that would be a trial, and that would be a significant trial, within the confines of what our doctrines dictate with regard to chastity, with regard to eternal marriage, and things of that nature. But to say that, if you're going to set up a world where God has given these things, and you bring out the thing, well, look at all the things they've been, all the benefit they've been to society, and productive members of society, and I fully agree that they're productive members. They, for the most part, as productive as anyone else that I can tell. But the one thing that's dangerous there is there's a lot of people that have a lot of tendencies and a lot of things that overall may also be productive members of society. I don't think that in any way excuses that. I mean, people may have attractions, people may have issues, mental illnesses, all sorts of things, but there's a purpose behind those. Certainly, God gives us these things so that we can become stronger and better. Where I think it's erroneous is to get off to assume that simply because God has allowed it, that God wants that to be us. I don't think simply because God gave us people that have issues mentally, that He wants them to remain in such a state. Simply because God gives people tendencies for whatever, doesn't mean He wants them to keep those tendencies. Certainly there's a purpose in them having them. Certainly they have a lot to give to society. But I really don't feel like it's a good thing to go determining what those purposes are, or to assume that because people are given certain pretexts, certain setups, that the cards are more stacked against them than they are against someone else, or what have you. You make the statement later on here, in response to one of Junior Alaska's comments. He said, I think a straight man, single man in the church is going to have a lot more to answer for in the hereafter than a single sister or a gay member. I don't think that's necessarily true. Maybe it may be generally, but I don't think it's necessarily true. We all have different challenges, but I believe that God's not a respecter of people. He's giving different challenges, giving different circumstances, and I just really think it's a danger to go and presume that simply because someone is given these things, and because there's the people that have these difficulties contribute a lot to society and are generally good people, means that the attribute they have is something that they should, that all parts of this attribute they should hold on to, or even the vast majority, or even all of it. I mean, certainly, again, things were put here to help to make us better, whether they're strengths or weaknesses, talents or difficulties, or what have you. There's a purpose behind us having to go through them, but I think it's really, really dangerous both to presume who does and doesn't have a bigger or lighter load, and also to presume that God would have something to answer for if the church is right, and I believe they are. And again, I don't believe you're correct in saying that not permitting blacks to have the priesthood was some error of the church. I don't believe it was. I don't believe it was doctrine, but I don't believe it was an error that it had been that way. Anyway, I hope I haven't made this too long, but I enjoy your continued comments, and I really enjoy interactions with you and your thoughts. Take care, and also your family.